PMS, pregnancy, menopause. Each stage of womanhood has its unique challenges. That's why Highlands Naturals' new women's multivitamins are formulated with essential daily nutrients, plus targeted support for your life stage. Facing PMS? There's a Highlands Multi for that. Navigating pregnancy and morning sickness? That too. In the throes of menopause, our formula is here to support you through hot flashes and skin changes. Gone are the days of juggling multiple supplements or guessing what you might need. With Highlands Naturals, it's one multivitamin with daily essential nutrients and science-backed ingredients to support you. An all-in-one wellness solution to lighten the load for women? Highlands Naturals is here for it. Find your multi at Amazon or Highlands.com. That's HYLANDS.com. Highlands Naturals. We're here for it.
You're at Wayne State.
Yep, I'm at Wayne State University. Almost 10 years now, which seems crazy, but yeah, I'm at Wayne State, enjoying it as much as one can, when you're doing all your classes on Zoom.
How strange is that? I mean, you've had to adapt pretty fast to stay in business and have classes through this technology.
Yeah, and I think maybe my the fire that I had to get dropped into was a little cooler, to stretch that metaphor a little bit, because this semester one of the three courses I'm teaching was, I do it online in the summer anyway, so doing it online in the fall, not a big deal. Another one was a hybrid course originally, partly in the classroom and partly online. So making it fully online, not a big stretch. And the third one was a brand new course that I had planned to do in a classroom, but it was a very small graduate seminar, so it was easy for us to have some good conversations over Zoom. And we kind of joked about halfway through the semester that if we were in person, we would no longer need the classroom. The four of us would just go out to dinner once a week and talk about music. So it's been good.
Well, we're here this evening because you are co-editors of a book about the musicology of one Billy Joel. I think that's absolutely fascinating. And tell us how this all got started. I know it has its origins from about 4 years ago when there was a musicology conference in Colorado, I believe.
Yeah. Josh, you want me to start, or you want to start?
Go for it.
Okay. So the first, thanks so much for inviting us here to talk with you about all of this. It's been a multi-year project and a lifelong passion in terms of the music. So it's always great to be able to talk more about it. The initial idea for all of this came out of kind of almost a tongue-in-cheek social media post. I tagged Josh and I said, hey, and I tagged a couple of the people who I knew were Billy Joel fans in the musicology world, and said, hey, anyone interested in doing a symposium or conference on Billy Joel? And people jumped on it very seriously and said, yes, absolutely, let me know. I'd love to do it. And I'm fortunate to be teaching at a college, Colorado College, that supports kind of odd ideas sometimes. And so I pitched the idea of a musicology conference to the powers that be and the administrators that had some money to help pull it off. And they said, go for it. So the conference came together with Josh and I kind of co-chairing the committee, the program committee, and bringing in submissions, call for papers for people to come in and talk about Billy Joel's music. But not just to talk about it like scholars would talk about it in really detailed musicological, analytical terms. That, but also in a way that non-musicologists could understand what is going on as well, right? So it was dubbed a public musicology conference, so that the goal was to distill our ideas in ways that the average fan or intelligent or smart active listener would be able to understand these different interpretations, which got pretty analytical at various points in time. So from there, Josh, do you want to pick up the story?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I have to say that the conference itself, it drew a wide variety of perspectives among the presenters. We had people from the field of law, we had people from medicine, in addition to music history, music theory, and the like. So it was, I mean, there was like a theological approach in one of the papers. It was really, really interesting stuff. And, you know, the highlight for us, I think it's safe to say, was the keynote. We had Billy call in and we interviewed him kind of over the phone in this auditorium where his voice is booming like the voice of God, you know. But it was a fantastic conversation. You know, we thought it would go about 45, 50 minutes. And by the time we started to wrap up, he said, well, you could ask me some more questions if you want. So clearly he was enjoying the conversation as much as we were, which was really gratifying. When it was all over and the dust settled, Ryan and I kind of kicked around the idea, you know, where do we take it from here? We had several of the other scholars who had been at the conference saying to us, when are we doing this again? And it was a lot of work, so I don't know when we're doing it again, although it would be a labor of love. But Ryan and I were looking for other ways to share what had come out at the conference, what had come out from the conference. And what struck us was that diversity of perspectives. So we pitched a book in which the idea was, we've got all these different ways of approaching the study of popular music, in particular, you know, filtered through the lens of one singer-songwriter, Billy Joel. So that, in a way, that becomes kind of the hook of the book, right? That this could be a model, a multidisciplinary model. And there's a lot of music in the book. There's some really, really technical stuff, because we allowed the authors, the contributors, to be a little bit more academic than they were at the conference. So you'll see some music notation and some really fancy analysis, but you'll also see some really cool photos of stuff at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and images of Billy Joel's notebooks where he's clearly tried some lyrics and scratched those out and tried some other lyrics. And so I think if you read through the whole book, you come away with an appreciation for how many different ways one can study this music.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. How did you come from a theological perspective, since he's pretty much an atheist? I mean, raised Jewish, obviously, but a lot of people, including myself when I was a kid, thought this guy's, an Italian and a Catholic, but really Jewish the whole time. I mean, no really religion to speak of so much. What theological angles did you tackle at the conference?
If I'm remembering correctly, it's a couple of years ago now, but it was it was a paper that was looking at it kind of almost from the universalist perspective of the language of the songs, and how the messages could be applied almost across religious perspectives, because it is, as you said, kind of a theological in a lot of respects. But it was delivered by a member of the Colorado College staff who's not in an academic position, but is an active member of their church, and preaches using the music of Billy Joel.
It's amazing. Dan, did you ever touch on the whole controversy with the single "Only the Good Die Young" and how that I think it was a professor or somebody from Seton Hall had an issue with the use of the language in "Only the Good Die Young"?
I don't recall it came up at the conference.
Yeah, that was an interesting controversy. Of course, I mean, he couldn't be totally clean his whole career. Certain things, I'm sure, hit some certain points. From a sociological perspective, though, I mean, he definitely captures a certain time, and definitely in the 70s. Did you all touch on that? And like going back to Piano Man and his time being out west, and how he captured that era?
Absolutely. I think that was one of the themes that ran through a lot of the papers, was the way that history was presented through his music, because he does such a wonderful job of capturing an attitude, a time, a zeitgeist, a feeling of a certain place, right? I mean, my presentation at the conference was, if I recall, about how he treats the topic of history in his songs. From, one example was the Ballad of Billy the Kid, in which he sings as if this were the way that Billy the Kid's story actually goes, but it's totally fabricated in the song. And he doesn't hide that fact. And you ask him, he'll tell you to your face, I made a lot of that stuff up. All the way to kind of the end of his career, where he's singing about history itself and the broad sweep of humanity. He's got references to Genesis, and then it becomes this kind of love story, which could really be father-daughter. Oh gosh, I'm embarrassed to say, what is the title of that piece?
You thinking about Lullaby?
No, although that's another really good father-daughter one. It'll come to me.
Are you talking about
some point later in this conversation?
Are you talking about the final track on River of Dreams?
Not the final track, but it's on the B-side, that's for sure. Anyway, I'll let you know when I come up with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's so much there, and it's like, I know it. It's on the tip. I've heard it thousands of times. Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
But going back to his very early solo, yeah, it came to me.
2,000 Years.
Okay. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah, I love that, and how he did that in concert too, as well. It really captured seeing that here's a new decade, the new century is coming upon. If you forget about that after all these years, now we're 20 plus years into this new century, and how he was really just summing it all up for 2,000 years. Yeah, just brilliant. In his early solo career, after he did the bands like Attila and stuff like that, did you all talk about the Cold Spring Harbor era, and how it seemed to be like he was heavily influenced by Bob Dylan?
Yeah, there's so the paper that I gave at the conference looked at, and it's the version that was converted into a chapter for the book, kind of looks at the greatest hits albums, and talks a little bit about why some of those earlier songs are not on there, right? I mean, obviously they were not the big hits, right? Piano Man was the first big hit, but thinking about the ways those songs shaped him as a creator, right? And like you said, it influenced him as a singer-songwriter, right? Billy kind of wanted to start off as a brill building kind of guy. Like, he wanted to write songs for other singers, but he ended up singing them himself. And that's one of the things that's been really key to, I guess, the positive and negative reception of Billy Joel over time, right? There's a lot of critique that he's derivative and that he sounds like other people, but it's that a lot of the time he's writing in the style of other people, and he just happens to be the one singing the song. If he had given the song to someone else to sing, then they wouldn't have thought about it as being derivative at all. It would have been like that artist that it sounds like.
And in many ways, my chapter in the book is about that. My chapter in the book is a little different from what I presented at the conference. In the book, it's about the links between the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper and Billy Joel's The Nylon Curtain, which, to someone who's familiar with the Beatles and then goes and listens to The Nylon Curtain, you'll say, yes, of course. But my goal with that chapter in the book is to add some real musical detail to what have been pretty general conversations in interviews that he's given and in the media and that sort of thing, to add some real musicological meat to it. But in many ways, he's writing to sound like McCartney's songwriting, or he's singing, and he admits to this, singing like John Lennon, because he was at that time in 1982, he was still feeling traumatized by Lennon's death, and the realization that there would be no more Beatles, kind of an end of the era perspective. At the same time, the whole album is capturing this idea, the American dream seemed so tantalizingly close, and now it might not come true for the next generation.
Oh yeah, did he get that? Especially with Allentown. I mean, he didn't have huge hits off of that, but Allentown really got it, and it's about the only time he really got political. The Inside Jacket, I don't know if you've seen the LP to The Nylon Curtain, but it shows like the row houses and all of that stuff about the American dream. And I love the cover. It's like, basically that's like, the novel of America at that time.
with the hues, the shades of orange, like it's a sunset. I mean, the visual imagery is really powerful as well, which one could argue, and I kind of wish I had argued in the chapter, is not all that different from the visual imagery that you'd find on the Sgt. Pepper LP.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's colorful in a different way, right? That you can read a different message into it, but still they're using all of the tools, all of those arrows in the quiver, right, to send a message.
Yeah, it was interesting at the time because I didn't really think, oh yeah, this is Billy Sgt. Pepper. He didn't say that till years later. At the time when it came out, it was like, gosh, this is just so Beatlesque. This is just really different, but wasn't like a huge hot seller after it had, following up Glass Houses, which was this huge arena, feel smash hit. And then he got very creative. And at that time, it took, about 6 months for him to write, record, get that out, which was considered a long time back in those days. And now here we are years later.
Right. And he would probably also admit that he doesn't really enjoy writing songs as much as having had songs written.
Yeah. And some of the covers he did with that Greatest Hits Volume 3, which he just seemed to adore just covering. And you could see where those influences were on him all those years.
Yeah.
In the book, so what other type of essays are in this book? And the proper title of this book, it's kind of a mouthful here. If you want to hold that up for the audience, it's We Didn't Start the Fire, Billy Joel and Popular Music Studies. This is required reading for those studying at Wayne State and Colorado College.
So what else is in here? Let's see. We've got a chapter comparing ambition, escape, and authenticity in Billy Joel and Bruce Springsteen, someone to whom he is so often compared, right? That he is to New York as Springsteen is to New Jersey.
Right, and that's an article, essay by John Scheinbaum, who's also a Colorado professor. He's at Denver University, and he does a really interesting comparison and analysis in this chapter about looking at Moving Out versus Thunder Road, and kind of some of the different themes and similarities, both lyrically and sonically, both in terms of the soundscape as well as the music itself, as a way of looking at the comparison between Billy Joel and Bruce Springsteen, who is someone, as Josh said, is often referred to. And so it again digs that much further deeper into that existing comparison in the same way that Josh did with the Beatles. Like there's something that's there, but let's dig deeper and really show how far it goes. Right.
After that, there's a chapter on piano culture. Well, the proper title here, Billy Joel, Piano Culture, and Rock's Road Not Taken, Jonathan Bellman, also a Colorado representation there. And that's a really fun read because it's got this personal tone to it, but at the same time, it's kind of universal in the sense that he's...
Are you struggling to conceive? You have options, and at Piedmont Reproductive Endocrinology Group, we'll make sure you have the guidance and support you need. PREG is known for individualized fertility care that's unique to every patient. We take the time to provide a reassuring and empowering experience because we believe that you deserve nothing less. Let us help you on your journey to parenthood. Visit us at pregonline.com to learn more. Get the guidance and support you need at Piedmont Reproductive Endocrinology Group.
PMS, pregnancy, menopause. Each stage of womanhood has its unique challenges. That's why Highlands Naturals' new women's multivitamins are formulated with daily essential nutrients, plus targeted support for your life stage. PMS, Highlands has a multi for that. Pregnant and having morning sickness? That too. In the throes of menopause, we've got you covered. No matter what phase of life you're in, Highlands Naturals is here for it. Find your multi on Amazon or at highlands.com.
Bellman is writing about the instrumentation of rock and roll and the difference between the guitarist and the piano player and how fraught the role of the piano player is, right? Especially for a good Jewish boy like Billy Joel,
He also does these great transcriptions of different versions of I think it's Travelin' Prayer. He goes to live recordings and transcribes and notates out, and these are included in the book, transcriptions of the piano solos, and does an analysis of the development of those solos and how they evolved and then finally became locked in place by the time of the recording, as another way of showing his creative songwriting process.
That's fascinating. That really is. Do you touch on when he does Souvenir and how that was inspired by a classical piece? That's kind of an interesting how he's explained that in the master classes. How he was, I'm forgetting what composer inspired him for that particular piece, but that was kind of a fascinating thing.
We're going to save that one for volume 2.
Yeah. And he's one of these very few artists who did these master classes, and it's like, here's the genius and the development behind some of these songs, and I'm sure that probably helped quite a bit as you were developing this.
And I think that has made his music really rich for those who want to explore it and investigate it, whether one has the tools of musicology or music theory or just really attentive ears and the interest in the time to spend listening to it. But he's also, I think it's helpful that he's so upfront, and he was supportive of the conference and supportive of this book, upfront about how he's got these influences, and he's happy to talk about the music as he did in the master classes as well.
How did that come about, getting him involved in the conference?
Well, I had written a book on his music that was published in 2017. So it was the year after the conference, but it had been more or less written at that point. And in the course of writing that book, I got in touch with his people.
Yeah.
I figured I could write this book without him, but you get what you don't ask for. So I pitched the idea that I'd love to talk with him about his music, and I wasn't just a fan, although I certainly am a fan, but also, applying this scholarly perspective. And I guess it was my lucky day, because the answer came back yes, and we spoke on the phone, and then about a month later, I spent a day with him at his house on Long Island, and he was really, really gracious as a host, and he was happy to talk about his stuff, and so we kind of started a relationship that way. And so I was able to draw on that relationship when it came time to plan the conference. And so, we had invited him to the conference. He was unable to be there in person, which may have been a blessing in disguise, because it certainly would have changed the scene, right?
Yeah.
But we were thrilled to have him on the phone, so we could actually ask him questions that came up at the conference, some of which have influenced or made their way into the book as well.
And that's one of the nice things we were able to do with the book, was draw on that interview, and that interview itself is published as an appendix to the final chapter of this volume. So it's got it's not really an edited transcript. It's really what he's saying, the order of the questions and how we did it all. So it's kind of like this raw, archival document that people can use now to inform future work on Billy Joel, because as wonderful as he has been in the, in the master classes, like you're saying, he tends to tell the same stories, right? We tend to hear the same things, but just what a lot of artists do, right? You get your thing and you stick with it. And what we found happened and was wonderful was that he opened up about a whole bunch of stuff that he hadn't, necessarily said in those ways, or in those, those deeper musicological and analytical directions, because when he does interviews or talks more generally, he can't engage at that level necessarily.
Yeah, that I've always noticed, and a lot of artists do that. They have that prepared story behind the same thing. So I think coming at it from that academia level definitely helped. And it gets all these other nuggets out there, which probably jogged his memory quite well. And you were able to get there on that. There was
we
one.
were lucky that Josh had primed the pump by interviewing him a lot before too, so he had a good relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So then it probably wasn't that tough to come back and say, hey, can you do the forward to this new book?
Right. Well, when we were interviewing him at the conference, he asked for a full report on the conference. And Ryan had worked really hard with the students and the staff at Colorado College to make sure that every single presentation was captured on video. So we were able to send several DVDs over to Billy Joel. And, I don't know whether he actually watched them, but I'd like to think that he did, made a bowl of popcorn and, put it on like for the Saturday night movie, just learn, a lot of public musicology. But so he knew what was going on at the conference. And I don't think it was a terribly big ask at that point to say, would you like to do the forward? Of course he could have said no, and we would have gone on, but it is so much richer now that he did.
Yeah. And it shows you how much he really appreciates academia, even though here's another contrast, didn't graduate from high school, all that stuff. And it's funny to see the contradictions and to see obviously how far he's come.
Right.
Of course, he probably had some honorary degrees too as well.
Yeah, you could say that.
Very good. Did you get the feeling when you went up there in New York that he really captured all the lightning in a bottle? Like he really got the culture. I mean, you got immersed in it when you went for the visit.
Oh, sure. And we spent some time at his piano. I sat on a chair next to the piano, as much as I may have wanted to share the piano bench with him. Boundaries, but. We spent a lot of time at the piano where he would play through musical ideas from classical composers that had influenced him. He's a big fan of some of those Romantic era folks, especially Beethoven, Schumann, all of those folks. But one of the things I found fascinating was talking about songs where he had a particular melodic idea in mind that you don't necessarily hear in the final recording. And so he could play and kind of mark his way singing through the song for me while emphasizing that melody. And it's a whole new way of hearing the song.
Yeah, I find that to be really fascinating. And the one that he always keeps referencing is Laughter in the Rain, which became Moving Out. It's like he steps people through that. And I'm like, what? How did you how did you build on that? And that really is amazing. I'm sure that was probably amazing how you were at his piano and he's like saying, here's the origin of this.
Yeah. It was really great. And we could talk on a technical level. I was asking him about songs where he did some really unconventional things as far as the harmonic progression, the chord changes. And the response that I got from him, in retrospect, it really fits his story, but at the time I was kind of struck by it, that he really didn't have the technical facility. I mean, he kind of didn't practice his chord, his scales all that much, but he would play what sounded good. And then he found himself, after doing all these really interesting chord changes, that he'd kind of painted himself in a corner and he had to figure out a way to get back to the white keys, to the key of C. Right? And what came out of it is a really cool song. State of Grace was the one that I was off of Stormfront.
Stormfront. Okay. Yeah. It's just wow. I just can't even picture like sitting next to him and it's like him going through all of that and discussing how it came to fruition.
I was really honored. I was really honored to be there with him, and even the conversations we've had subsequently. I spoke with him for the chapter in this book, about Sgt. Pepper's influence on him in particular. And I really appreciated how he's respected the academic mission and the tools that not just me, but that everybody at the conference and everybody represented in the book, which is really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the conference, but the tools that they could bring to bear on his works. I
think it's fascinating how he basically is pretty much self-taught. And how does that even come to being? How could you teach yourself? I mean, he did have piano lessons as a kid, but not much. Never learned. I mean, like many of these stars, never learned to read music. Is an innate ability? Is that something that you've studied? Either one of you have studied about how people are able to pick up a guitar and a piano and then teach themselves and then create songs that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of part of the process of learning a craft, right? It's like you know, it's almost like I don't know, let me call it like a sonic apprenticeship of sorts. But he references in the intro, the foreword, he talks about how he would just put on records and listen to them and be like, okay, first I'm going to figure out what's going on with the melody. I'm going to figure out what's going on with the rhythm. I'm going to figure out what's going on with the arrangement around it. I'm going to figure out what's going on with the lyrics, and really studied the music like we might do in the classroom using a lot of technical jargon, but doing it in his own mindset, in his own way of hearing it. And then, as Josh was referencing, his own way of talking about it, right? He's got a facility to talk about his music, but it may not be with the, you know, the lexicon of Western classical theory, right? Which is fine, right? I mean, it's how you put it into your own way that it makes you feel comfortable and you can understand it and talk about it. And I think that's also what crafts his development as a songwriter and as someone who could become the musician that he is, was just to listen and imitate. And that's I mean, that's what the Beatles did too, right? They started off as a cover band, and they only got to where they went because they also listened and learned and repeated and did it a lot, before coming up with these grand ideas.
Yeah, and he took it just like the Beatles, and I know he says, "Oh, I'm nothing like the Beatles," but took it to much higher levels, and that's what made them so unique. And you know, that's how they became so wildly successful. I think in sociological terms, there are a number of songs, and I think has told both of you that, well, some songs are really dated. I would venture to say Captain Jack. And some songs just didn't, they don't really hold up as well on the shelf, and others are just timeless. What does he say about like 20% of his catalog is something he's
I remember the number that he gave out here. 20%. He said probably somewhere around 20% of my published song catalog I don't think are very good.
Yeah, I think when you get to be so trendy, especially something like Captain Jack, again, it's capturing the time and the moment. But like, wow, that's like it's something we don't even know about today. And but then again, you look at something like My Life, I think has real sociological connotations. Go ahead with your own life, leave me alone. It's like, is this a character who's so selfish? Does he talk to like the sociological aspects of some of his songs?
What do you think, Ryan?
He tends to, at least in the my reading and hearing of him, he tends to kind of shy away from the analytical side of the lyrics and the meanings of it. He's way more interested in talking about and thinking about the musical side of things. But in terms of the different characters and the different messages that he's putting out there, the way that he writes songs is he comes up with the melody first, the chord progression first, and then he fits, how does it feel? And then he writes lyrics to fit that feel. So he doesn't necessarily start out by saying, I want to write about, getting out from underneath my parents' roof. Like, I'm not going to write, that's not how he starts a song, right? But something about the process of creating maybe triggers a direction for the lyrics. But also, if you look at the lyrics and you look at the chapter that we've got in the book here, that is about his songwriting process, lyrics change pretty wildly in some cases from the initial idea to the finished product. So I don't know, Josh, you've got a lot more under your belt in terms of his, the sociological side of this, but.
I think that he's such a history buff. I think that it is actually more fruitful to talk about his songwriting as capturing moments in history. And I think you can do that certainly with Captain Jack. But one that for a lot of people really does it is Scenes from an Italian Restaurant.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of talk at the conference about that one, to the point where we asked him directly about, what is going on in this song. And not only is it capturing moments in history, but it's doing it in this kind of nostalgic way and using music to literally travel through time. You've got these long musical passages where, as he put, the pages of the calendar are flipping back, right? And then changing the style of the music to reflect an older period. Now, if I recall from one of the presentations at the conference, there was some critique that maybe the style of the music wasn't actually matching the period that he was singing about. But as with Ballad of Billy the Kid, it's kind of like, don't get lost in the details.
Right. Yeah.
Right? We're referencing the past, and it's a farther past than our previous reference to the past, right? And it, becomes very effective, but it's also a lot of fun. And in that song, it tells a story that is kind of familiar, maybe to a particular generation, but certainly to, an American scene, that idea of like the king and the queen of the prom. And they didn't realize it. We didn't realize it. Nobody knew it at the time. But being king and queen of the prom was as high, as good as it got for them.
Yeah.
And now, we all have high school reunions, right? We go back and oh my goodness, what happened to him? What happened to her? And that's kind of the gist of a large portion of the song. But at the same time, you could talk about the musical construction of it, both as time travel, but also as a Beatles reference. I mean, it's kind of his A Day in the Life.
Yeah.
Where you have different musical ideas that are woven together.
It's true. And something that a lot of us can relate to. I think that's another huge selling point of an artist like this. We could so relate to these lyrics, although, hey, don't read too much into these. It's like, this is what just came to mind, because it's really the melody first. But it is interesting with the stylistic choices that he makes, and he does that with Italian Restaurant. Another one that really comes to mind is Down Easter Alexa. Of course, that gets a little...
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
A little bit political too, nothing like Allentown, but he was, it kind of reminds me of the Wreck of Edmund Fitzgerald. It kind of has that kind of being at sea kind of feel to it.
And there's a whole chapter on that song in the book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Morgan Jones is the author of that chapter, and he did a lot of research on it. He actually wrote his doctoral dissertation on Billy Joel. Not just that song, but that song played a big part of the doctoral dissertation. But the idea of trying to write a folk song, that only folk music could really capture what he felt was being said through that music. And there are particular things that show up sonically that help us to understand that. Moving the drums so that they're not hitting on 2 and 4, but they're hitting on 1 and 3, which, in the grand scheme of things may not be all that remarkable, but it's such a change from rock and roll and rock. It just turns the whole thing on its head, and we pay attention as a result.
Yeah.
It really stands out. Just that drum progression too. It's really, and as far as it being in Stormfront, it kind of has that whole seafaring theme to it.
Right.
Which he obviously he probably showed you and loves with being on the water.
Yep.
And,
Yeah. He when I was sitting with him outside at his house, he would point to boats sailing by and tell me about the boats. Just, oh yeah, that one is a, this or that or some kind of rigging. I don't know, but he knew. So and he's designed his own boats and whatnot. So this was clearly familiar territory to him, but also he grew up on Long Island and he's singing about Long Islanders. And you could say that it's the story of this one guy out on his boat, but really it's the story of lots of guys at the time who were struggling. And if you really want to dig into it, which I did in my 2017 book, there's a lot of politics, there's regulation at work here, there's gentrification at work. You could say, thanks to the construction of the Long Island Expressway, those far reaches of Long Island are now changing and they don't look the way they did before to the people who've lived there for generations. So there's really a lot to it. And I think that Morgan gets to some of that and I get to some of that, but it's a lovely song to listen to. And it's one that he's particularly proud of.
yeah.
But there are many layers to that onion.
And I love hearing Yitzhak Perlman, and he joins him on that. That's just, it really brings that to a whole other level too. You just feel like you're out at sea. It's like the rolling waves. It so conjures all of that. And also how he captures the frustrations of things. I think this is throughout all of the US. He captures this in No Man's Land. And especially the music in No Man's Land. This is the opening track to his last pop album, right, released in late 1993. Totally. I mean, I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, he'd probably describe it as a look out the window song and he used that phrase for Captain Jack when I was talking to him about Captain Jack, but in No Man's Land, he's looking out the window or he's driving around town with his daughter saying, this is not what this place used to be like. Things are changing and not necessarily for the better.
Yeah. And again, with the music in that, you could just feel the pounding, the anger with that. We all feel that way. Not just like gentrification so much, just the commercialization and how, so many people are turning into zombies.
Yep.
Just consumerism totally gets that. That's a good driving song. Especially when you're driving around all this stuff.
Or sitting in traffic on the Long Island Expressway.
Oh. Like,
I don't know how many of us have had that experience, but yes.
Being in the urban jungle, yeah, it's terrible sitting in traffic. Not too much now in the pandemic, but
true,
pretty close to that. Wow. Going back into his catalog, there was a real transition time there where he had just come off of Street Life Serenade and he was really trying to find himself with Turnstiles. I love how he came back to New York and you could really feel that. Did he discuss how that came to him? I know there's a lot of the same stories about how New York State of Mind, Ford says drop dead to New York and all that. Was there any new nugget you got out of that, how he built New York State of Mind?
I don't know. Ryan, do you remember? I don't
remember that being kind of directly addressed, but it is, I mean, certainly it's, you're getting at something that I think is really interesting about Billy Joel, but also artists in general, is the way that we construct their kind of biographical narrative around their songs and their different stages of life and different transitions and how we can read into them or not in the way that we, hear their maybe personal development and growth alongside the cultivation and development of their own music, right? So whether it was a conscious decision or not, he did, made these pivots and shifts, and we do hear those moves as he physically moves around, right? And as he physically grows up, right? You definitely hear a man going from being a in 20s to 30s to 40s, right? And we get that trajectory across the set of albums going up to River of Dreams. And that's where I wish there was more, because I'd like to hear what he thought, what he was writing thought about as he was in his 50s and 60s, and he talks about his life now since then. And I would hope and think that he's written other songs. Maybe he's just not sharing them, but that we no longer have that narrative of his life, right? It gets cut off in 1993 for all intents and purposes. I mean, we get a couple of other things, including the classical album later, but we also like to ascribe who we think of and who we vision artists to be based off of their catalog.
And as closely as Billy Joel is tied to the idea of New York, one of the chapters in the book examines Allentown as a city and Allentown as a song.
Yeah.
And the interaction between the two, because the song was not always received warmly in the city, that's a chapter by Sarah Messbauer, and she goes into some of the business research about branding schemes, but also she mentions some fascinating answer songs where people in Allentown had written songs kind of in response to Billy Joel's Allentown, which places it in a long line. I mean, you can find answer songs going back to Tin Pan Alley, if not earlier. So to me, it was this wonderful moment of a very specific moment in history, in Billy Joel's career, in Allentown, but also connected to the broader arc of American music and music history.
That's interesting. So in that essay, did it talk about some people in Allentown were really into it, others were like, yeah, wait a minute, this is an outsider, he's not getting it here, hold on?
Yeah, there was certainly some resistance and some eye rolling, and just it's not that Billy Joel never went there, because he did. I mean, the whole Lehigh Valley was kind of bread and butter. It's not that far from New York, and the venues were the right size for him at a particular point in his career. I think that some people were afraid that they and Allentown and their hometown would be abandoned once he got bigger. And maybe this wasn't what they wanted to be remembered for or known for. But at the same time, they give him a key to the city. Right? So you mentioned contradictions. There's plenty there too.
Yeah. He's such an inspiration because, just like David Bowie really went all over the place through his career and just constantly changed. But Billy, as you could see as a solo artist, really changes it up too. And after Nylon Curtain, goes completely to the other direction and really builds an album upon his roots. Late 50s, early 60s style of music. And this was all released in the early 1980s, which I thought was a huge risk at that time, to do something that retro at a time when, this was the early years of Reagan and people were into that more plasticky pop bubblegum music. So it was a heck of a stretch for him to do that. I think really the one that stands out is The Longest Time, just seeing how he built that from that doo-wop.
Yeah, and I agree. Maybe it was a gamble, but oh boy, did that gamble pay off. I mean, Ryan can tell us how many greatest hits came off of that one album. A bunch. Let's just say a bunch.
Like half a dozen almost. There's no shortage of hits on that. And I think, you're getting at, Robert, this idea of it was a risk, but also it actually might have been the smartest thing to do in the midst of the 80s, in an era where, technology is moving really quickly. We're getting into, like you said, the Reagan era, but that desire and want and need for that earlier era that was familiar, that was the 1950s. It's the America that was, right. We've certainly been through that phase again recently, right. This desire, to want to, for some people in the country to want to go back to the way things were. And so musically, it's an interesting choice to kind of as maybe a he didn't plan it this way, but as a, almost a sonic combative move, right, to the synthy pop sound of the 80s, to go back to that era, to a time that, certainly his primary base of fans that were maybe older than him, right, would definitely grasp onto. And those that were his age definitely still had some resonance, because it may not have been their music, but it was definitely the music that they encountered and heard from their parents.
And to be fair, it's not that Billy Joel ignores the sound of the 80s.
Right. Yeah, but yeah, right? He definitely has a lot of 80s songs.
Right. I mean, he gets there, especially in the bridge.
Oh yeah.
Album, right. And that is a big 80s sound through all that synthesized stuff. Not his favorite album.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll leave it there.
He really made up for that, though. Yeah, it was funny because here was this time period where smash hits off of this retro sounding album, and then he more than makes up for it the following time with gosh, there's so much synthesizer, still good stuff on there. There really is. I mean, and I was talking with Liberty, his drummer, about a month or so ago, and some good stuff came out of there, including his work with Cyndi Lauper. I really enjoyed that, and working with Steve Winwood. I think there were two really good highlights out of that. And
yeah, it's kind of a shame that the album didn't hang together more tightly, I think, because so many of the individual performances and so much of the songwriting is really, really solid on that album. I mean, you mentioned the collaboration with Cyndi Lauper. To me, that's one of the least appreciated of his songs, but one of my favorites.
Yeah, it was great that he, like the one collaboration out of his whole pop catalog is with her. And she was totally, at that time, very unappreciated. But I think over time, there was some of that appreciation coming through. It just took a long time for that to happen for her. I mean, True Colors came out that same year, and just a beautiful song. And there's so many tributes paid to that song. It's kind of like her anthem. And Steve Winwood is just, I think Billy, I think, really idolized him as well, going back to the Spencer Davis days. So he got to collaborate with them. And then, of course, Ray Charles. We're totally thinking about him.
Right. How could we forget?
Yeah. I mean, and I like that it was very tongue-in-cheek and saying, hey, nobody's going to play this on the radio. And again, a style that he had adopted, in a retro style in that album. That really worked very well, somewhat as well too with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had mentioned how the great variety there. It's to some degree you need a neck brace, because where do we go from there? We go to this very raw bar band sound.
Right.
The very next album with Stormfront, which is great, for other reasons.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way, and of course, the title of your book, here he's going through that. Did he discuss how, I mean, he's talked a lot about how he's built that song, but it's like, obviously maybe not his favorite song, but he wanted to just, sum up the first 40 years of his life.
Right, and that's the only song that where he did start with the lyrics. And the fact that it is not his favorite song is probably because it didn't start with the music, right? But it was, a heck of a success for him.
Oh, yeah, it got played to death. It really did at that time. Like certain ones of his songs that he doesn't want to do Just the Way You Are so much in concert. But, one of his most wildly successful, and he wasn't even going to put that on the album. Phoebe Snow and Linda Ronstadt said, hey, we want this on The Stranger. So, yeah, but played so much. But, that's the thing. It becomes part of Americana. It's so woven into the fabric of our society.
And it's so historically conscious. The music historians in the room, are thrilled because of history is the subject, right?
Yeah.
Particularly American history, but history in general. is the subject of that song, and by taking it as the title for our book, it's not only tapping into the fact that that is, that's a number one hit, that was one of his most successful songs. If you find somebody who doesn't know much about Billy Joel, they probably still know We Didn't Start the Fire. But at the same time, it's also, at least in my mind, and I don't know, Ryan, you can disagree, but there's also the study of popular music is, in the grand scheme of things, relatively new. But popular music has been around in various forms for as long as music has been around. Right? So we didn't start this. we're showing you how one way, well, a variety of ways, right, that it could be studied.
It's funny. First,
a variety of ways that that scholars can engage with this music, right? Like Josh mentioned, Morgan Jones writing a dissertation on Billy Joel. I mean, before this conference, there were two Billy Joel scholars, Morgan and Josh, and everyone else who contributed papers had been fans of Billy Joel, but they weren't writing on Billy Joel. They were writing on different areas and with their different areas of expertise. But then they were given the opportunity to take those approaches and apply it to Billy Joel. So again, these perspectives and the ways that we're doing.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
A lot of the studies in here are not necessarily new by any means. They've been there, but we're putting them and applying them to a particular subject in a way that hasn't been done before. So now, with this volume, the number of essays on Billy Joel is like tripled, quadrupled, Josh? I don't know. It's a significant increase.
And even, there's at least one article in an academic journal that I can think of course, I can't remember the name at the very moment, but that isn't represented in a chapter in the book, but is also a result of that conference. So it really did jumpstart some serious academic scholarly research on Billy Joel's music beyond just what's captured in this book.
Yeah, the first time I heard We Didn't Start the Fire, I'm like, he's just rattling off names and ideas here. What? But it's so catchy. It's just, that's where the music really just hits. It's like you can't get it out of your head. There's just something about how he constructed that. Simplistic, but yeah, there's just something about a melody like that it just soars, and that's huge reason why it hits number one.
Although, to be honest, I think at one point he compared the melody of that song to a mosquito.
He doesn't realize the genius in that. It's like, there's just something about that. It just really you can't get it out of your head.
It is an earworm.
An earworm, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that is incredibly true. Yeah, you talk about something getting overplayed so much and going back to Just the Way You Are. That's, another one that was a huge hit, and that just has just this really sinking melody that you just totally just adore. And She's Always a Woman. Those, I think, probably lyric-wise, get completely overanalyzed as well, which I know he's discussed.
And misinterpreted.
Yeah, completely, especially with Just the Way You Are. It's like, what? He's being a misogynist. How does that even happen?
And with She's Always a Woman, the number of people who thought it was She's Only a Woman, like it was patronizing, it was not even the title of the song. Right? It's She's Always a Woman, like the qualities that make her a woman are actually the redeeming qualities.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
makes him a better person.
Right. He's paying homage to a woman and not, but especially at that time in the 70s, it was like a lot of women's lib that were going for the equal rights amendment and all of that. So yeah, the Stranger just being as big of a hit has a little bit of an autobiographical touch to it with Vienna. He talk about how he's built that song up and using the instruments that were used in that.
You may have just hit on another one that I don't recall him discussing very much at the conference. No.
That it was about his dad, and he really just got the spirit of the whole scene of Vienna.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, for sure. And it's a very, he really captures a vibe with that introduction to that song. Man. And then when the vocal comes in, I hear it, maybe other people would hear it differently, but I hear so much innocence.
Yeah.
Because of the timbre of his voice and where the melody is placed, but the message isn't necessarily, the message is delivered by someone who's kind of seen it before, like, slow down.
Yeah.
Slow your roll. Take your time. It'll be okay. Been there before. It's all right. So I think that song, there's so many layers on that one as well.
Yeah. It's how the music is built to a theme like that. And, you feel like you're in Vienna going down the waterway. Just you could, this is before music videos too, which I loved about The Stranger. We had the 8-track in the car, and I was able to just use imagination and put the imagery to the music. And music videos, really, which I know he complained a lot about, took away from so much of that, because an image then became attached to it, whether it was a concept video or a performance video.
I remember he's the one who wanted to be, as Brian mentioned, a songwriter, not the singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
So now he's got to sing his own songs, and then you want this guy, you want to see him too?
That became part of it, yeah. And he joked a lot about that in concert, saying, "Oh gosh, I'm not Cary Grant here. What are you expecting?" I like some of the innocence though that came through in some of the songs, like "Leave a Tender Moment Alone," and how he conjured up Burt Bacharach for that. Just really, really, just I think that was a great combo. I like how he was able to do something like that.
For sure. Another one that I don't recall was discussed very much at the conference or comes up in the book, but you had mentioned kind of the gendered aspect of some of the songs. That is something that comes up in the book quite a bit. That's Elise Morera's chapter, and it's not just about the gendered aspects, but about gendered embodiment, because she's looking at American Sign Language interpreters who have to interpret Billy Joel's lyrics.
Yeah.
All of the baggage that gets attached to those lyrics. Now, are they embodying the woman? Are they embodying Billy's character? Are they embodying Billy? It's really complex, especially when there aren't necessarily direct translations between the lyrics and ASL.
That's incredibly interesting. Sign language and how that could be translated as well.
Yeah.
So, it being at the conference, what were some of the more interesting moments that had happened through there? Anything incredibly humorous that anybody touched on there?
There were a lot of lyrical puns, a lot of people working certain lines or song titles into their papers, both in terms of the presenters giving their papers, but also the audience asking questions as well. There seemed to be a very there's a lot, because everybody knows the catalog, everybody knows all these songs, so there was a lot of that the insider knowledge of being a group of people that don't usually get together to do this kind of stuff, except for, going to massive concerts, but you're not necessarily talking about the music. You're there just to listen to the music.
Really interesting. And he's had a few instrumental tracks in his catalog. That's really, I mean, he probably just likes it. I don't have any lyrics for this. Like, let's go for it. Did he discuss anything about that? I was like, here, I've just got the melody. I'm out on lyrics here.
I think one of the ones we talked about is an instrumental was Root Beer Rag. And that came up, because he wrote that because he got this new synthesizer he wanted to play with, and he wanted, it's a piano rag, but if you listen to it, there's this, really high pitched synth that floats in and out of the whole recording. So we talked about that in terms of like the ways that he, sometimes plays with, technology, and plays with the new thing that comes his way, so that he's not always bound to the piano. And actually, we talked about "We Didn't Start the Fire" song earlier. I mean, that's not a piano song, right? That's a guitar song. And when he does it in concert, and he stands at the front of the stage with his Stratocaster or whatever guitar he's got, and rocks out. So, in terms of song, this is something that hasn't, I don't think came up, Josh, in the conference or our book, but I think something you've done some on, if I'm remembering, where you've looked at the songs that are not lyricked, they don't have lyrics, and I think it's your work, where we, if it's not, fake it here, where the songs that are, it's not because he didn't come up with a good lyric, it's a song that just isn't, it's not a song, right? It's not lacking a lyric, it just never was intended to have one.
I think a great example of that is the prelude that you hear before Angry Young Man, which, I mean, he'll tell you what the prelude is about. It's about something. It just doesn't need lyrics to convey the kind of combativeness that it's meant to embody. It's really about this guy who was working for him, who had been so scarred by his experience in Vietnam, probably before they would call it PTSD, that had kind of created a toxic workplace, and Billy had to let him go. And as a result, this song comes about where in a conversation between them, where Billy is saying, "I feel for you, man, but you can't work with us anymore." And the guy kind of creates this Pontius Pilate, Jesus Christ dichotomy, and Billy realizes, man, if he's calling me what I think he's calling me, then he's the one with the Christ complex here. And so there's this grandiosity to the song, there's this combativeness, and you can hear it in those machine gun C's that he starts with on the piano, all of the hits on the drum and the cymbals and the back and forth, so that by the time we actually get to the song Angry Young Man, things kind of calm down. Like, that song is much, much calmer. We can breathe much easier, even though that's where a lot of people would find the meaning, because that's where the lyrics are. Yet there's still a lot of meaning to the instrumental that preceded it. And I think it's great that for a long time he would use that as his opening number in performance. I mean, there's pianistic acrobatics to that song. It's really impressive. It's really hard to play, at least for me. At one time I could do it, but I'm really rusty now.
It's hard for him to play now too.
Yes, there's that too. But I think it's really fascinating that a song with such aggression and such animosity behind it becomes this celebratory opening for so many of his live shows.
Oh, it was such a great live opening number. I love when he opened up with it, but yeah, it takes a lot of energy, and at this stage, yeah, I'm like, no. Looks like the piano would have a hard time taking it too. Isn't that kind of tough on the piano? I would think strings would be blowing up everywhere.
Probably.
Yeah, fortunately, he's got a really good piano and a really good piano tech to take care of things like that.
I would hope so, yeah. Wow. How does he inspire you all as musicians, though? How you do your own music? How does that affect you?
I was going to let you go first, Josh, but.
Oh, okay. All right. In answering that question, what comes to mind for me is high school. Because, I mean, my encounter with Billy Joel was listening to it in the car because my parents were listening to it. I grew up in Connecticut. I'm the son of two New Yorkers who met at Queens College. So, of course, it was going to be in the car. But I learned a lot about songwriting from listening to Billy Joel and wrote a lot of songs for a lot of girls I wished I had dated in high school, but didn't, based on Billy Joel songs. And, you know, some of it was, it'd be very generous to call it homage. It was really just an imitation. But towards the end of high school, beginning of college, I felt like my voice was inspired by his. It helped that I took years and years of piano lessons. It helped that I'm a tenor and he's a tenor. It helped that he was describing places and sounds and emotions that were familiar to me, at least vicariously through my parents. But more than that, there's also the forms that he uses, the interesting harmonic choices that he uses. I mean, that led me to believe, even if I wrote the lyrics first and he didn't, that there had to be something more than just the typical three chords to make this song interesting. I mean, the craft of his songwriting really made an impression on me.
Nice.
Yeah, I think I share a lot of that similar experience with Josh, which is one of the things that's, we talk about this a little bit in our introduction to the book, is like we actually, even though, I didn't meet Josh until, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, somewhere in there. But like, that we both grew up I grew up in Portland, Oregon, in the Northwest, in a completely different, environment than Connecticut, but it's similar in some ways, I guess. But that we both came to this music, and, it infiltrated my high school days as well. I played a lot of these songs for a lot of people when I was in high school. And I think for me, the way that it's been influential are two ways. One is, the way that it feels under my hands on the piano, like that whenever I write music now, not necessarily just like songwriting, but I do a lot of music now for theater and for performance, that I want it to always feel good on the fingers. Like I want it to just naturally flow under the hands and feel like it's just there, as opposed to being something that is too difficult. Even the, prelude, but as complicated as it is and as hard as it is to play, it's still really just, it fits when you lay those chords down. The hands, they go right into the right spot. So that kind of natural feeling of the instrument is idiomatic writing for the piano is really key for me. The other thing is being this is also something that Josh and I had in common too, is that we both, when we started our graduate work and started our studies as budding young scholars, we're told, no, you can't study the music of Billy Joel. So because it wasn't it's not a subject that was going to work in the academy. But so instead I turned to another songwriter, to George Gershwin, also a piano-based songwriter whose songs fit really darn well under your hands, and also really do interesting kind of harmonic things. And Gershwin didn't write his lyrics, but that there's that it launched me in this direction in terms of working on piano-driven songwriters. The next thing I'm starting to develop and work on is something around the music of Ben Folds, and so taking a more modern contemporary version of a Billy Joel style writer who also writes songs that fit really well under the hands, is kind of another continuation and extension of that influence.
Ryan, I have to say, if you and I went to the same high school, I think we would have been best friends.
Probably.
We would have tried to form a band, but we'd be fighting over who was the lead singer, piano player.
I would have defaulted to you. I think you're better.
I don't know.
Oh, that's funny. Well, thank you both for this evening. I really enjoyed this, and I hope Volume 2 comes out within the next couple of years.
There's so much more that could be said, so many other songs that we didn't get to.
Tons, yeah. There's much to be written, probably a few more volumes, so that'll keep you busy for a while.
For sure.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. It was great to talk with you.
Thank you. Take care. Have a good one.
Okay, round 2. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.